Listen, most people don't lose because they're lazy. They lose because they're thinking wrong. They wake up every day reacting instead of deciding. They move off emotion instead of strategy. They inherit beliefs they never chose and then wonder why their life feels small. Nobody ever sat them down and said, this is how you're supposed to think when pressure hits, when money is tight, when the vision feels far away. So today, I'm not here to motivate you for a moment. I'm here to rewire how you process life. Because when you learn how to think correctly, discipline gets easier, decisions get clearer, and progress stops feeling random. Your circumstances don't change first, your thinking does. Let me show you how. Most people walk their life feeling like they're being pushed around by forces they can't control. Like life just picked them as a target. One bad break after another, one missed opportunity after another, and after a while they stop questioning it. They say things like, I'm unlucky, nothing ever works out for me, other people just have better chances. That way of thinking feels comforting because it removes responsibility, but it also removes power. The moment you decide life is just happening to you, you give up the right to shape it. Correct thinking starts when you realize nothing in your life is random. Not your money situation, not your health, not your relationships, not even your confidence. Everything you're experiencing right now has roots. There's a cause behind every effect, even if it's uncomfortable to look at. The problem isn't that people don't work hard. A lot of people work hard. The problem is they work hard without understanding what they're working toward or what their actions are actually producing. They focus on effort, not direction. When you look at people who are consistent, really consistent, not just for a season, but over years, you notice something different about how they think. They don't talk about luck much. They talk about routines. They talk about systems. They talk about what they do every day when nobody is watching. Somebody with stable money didn't wake up rich one morning. They built habits around saving, learning, managing risk, and staying disciplined when spending would have felt better. Somebody with a strong body didn't just get good genetics. They showed up to workouts when motivation was low. They watched what they ate when temptation was high, and they did it long enough for results to compound. Science backs this up. Researchers from University College London found it takes around 66 days on average for a habit to become automatic. That means most of what you're dealing with right now is delayed feedback. You're not living in the results of yesterday. You're living in the results of months or even years ago. That's hard for people to accept because it means you can't fix everything instantly. But it's also freeing because it means your future isn't stuck. It's being written by what you repeatedly do starting now. Think about the person who says they're broke but spends 3 or 4 hours every night scrolling, watching, consuming. The surface level effect looks like lack of money. But that's not the real issue. The real issue is unmanaged time. Time that could have been invested in learning a skill, building a side income, improving health, or even just resting with intention. The phone didn't make them poor. The habit did. And habits don't form overnight. They form quietly, one decision at a time until the outcome feels permanent. This is where most people get stuck. They focus on the effect and ignore the cause. They treat symptoms instead of sources. They want more money but don't change spending patterns. They want confidence but don't keep promises to themselves. They want respect but don't set boundaries. Then they wonder why nothing changes. Correct thinking flips that. It teaches you to slow down and trace the result backward. If I don't like where I am, what behavior brought me here? What did I normalize that I shouldn't have? What did I avoid that I should have faced? Asking what caused this instead of why me is a turning point. Why me keeps you emotional. What caused this makes you strategic. It shifts your energy from complaining to constructing, from feeling sorry for yourself to studying yourself. That's not easy work. It requires honesty, real honesty. Not the kind you post online, but the kind you sit with alone. The kind where you admit, yeah, I wasted time. Yeah, I stayed comfortable. Yeah, I ignored warning signs. But that honesty is powerful because it gives you a starting point. Once you understand cause and effect, excuses stop making sense. You realize that blaming people, systems, or circumstances might feel good in the moment, but it doesn't move you an inch forward. Builders don't argue with reality. They analyze it. They ask what's working and what's not. They understand that discipline today creates options tomorrow. They also understand that small actions matter more than big intentions. Nobody becomes consistent by making promises. They become consistent by making deposits, daily deposits, even when the return isn't visible yet. Think about farming. You don't plant seeds and then wake up the next morning angry there's no harvest. You understand seasons. You understand growth takes time. You understand weather matters, but preparation matters more. Yet people expect instant results in life. They want six-pack discipline in 6 days. They want years of success off a few weeks of effort. When that doesn't happen, they call it bad luck. But it's not luck. It's impatience mixed with unrealistic expectations. Correct thinkers don't complain about the harvest. They check what they planted and how consistently they watered it. If the crop didn't grow, they don't curse the ground. They adjust the process. They learn, they replant. That mindset builds resilience. It keeps you moving forward even when results are slow, because you're no longer chasing outcomes, you're mastering inputs. This way of thinking also removes jealousy. When you understand cause and effect, other people's success doesn't threaten you. It educates you. You start asking, what did they do differently? How long did they stay committed when nobody cared? What sacrifices did they make that I haven't made yet? Instead of feeling behind, you feel informed, and information turns into strategy. Life will still test you, pressure will still come, setbacks will still hit. But when you think in cause and effect, you don't fold every time something goes wrong. You pause, you assess, and you respond. You understand that one bad day didn't ruin your life the same way one good day didn't build it. You stop living in extremes and start living with intention. This kind of thinking changes how you move every day. You become careful with your time because you know where wasted time leads. You become serious about your habits because you know habits are quiet architects of your future. You become patient with the process because you understand the math of consistency. And over time, people start calling you lucky. They don't see the nights you chose growth over comfort. They don't see the discipline you practiced when nobody was applauding. They just see the results. And that's fine, because by then you'll know the truth. You didn't get lucky. You got intentional. Emotion is real. Anybody telling you to ignore how you feel is lying to you. You're human, not a machine. You're going to feel anger, doubt, excitement, fear, pride, and frustration. Those emotions come fast and loud, especially when pressure shows up. But here's the truth most people never learn early enough. Emotion is temporary, and decisions live long after the feeling fades. One moment of uncontrolled emotion can shape years of your life. Most bad decisions aren't made because people are stupid. They're made because people are emotional and try to justify it afterward. They quit when it gets hard and call it self-care. They spend money they don't have and call it treating themselves. They say something reckless and call it being real. Emotion dresses itself up as logic, and if you don't train your mind, you'll fall for it every time. Think back to moments you regret. Really think about them. Chances are you weren't calm. You were tired, angry, hurt, insecure, or excited. You were in a feeling, not in clarity. And once the feeling passed, the consequences stayed. That's how people sabotage their own future without realizing it. Not through one big mistake, but through a pattern of emotional reactions. High performers feel everything you feel. They get nervous before big moments. They get frustrated when progress is slow. They get angry when disrespected. The difference is not emotional absence. The difference is emotional control. They don't let feelings grab the steering wheel. They acknowledge the emotion. Then they decide anyway. Look at elite athletes in the biggest moments. Stadium full, crowd screaming, pressure heavy, clock ticking down. That environment is designed to overwhelm you. But what do the great ones do? They slow down. They control their breathing. They lock back into fundamentals they've practiced thousands of times. They don't rush just because the moment is loud. That's not talent. That's training the mind to function under stress. That same principle applies to everyday life. Pressure doesn't just show up on a scoreboard. It shows up and builds relationships, careers, and self-doubt. Real pressure is getting disrespected and wanting to react. It's waking up tired and wanting to quit. It's seeing slow progress and questioning the whole plan. If you let emotion decide in those moments, you'll keep restarting your life at the same level. In real life, separating emotion from decision making looks simple, but it's not easy. It looks like not quitting a job on a bad day. Knowing one tough shift doesn't define your entire future. It looks like not responding immediately to disrespect. Understanding that silence can protect opportunities you haven't reached yet. It looks like sticking to the plan when results aren't visible. Trusting that consistency always beats impulse. Most people don't fail because the plan was wrong. They fail because they couldn't sit with uncomfortable feelings long enough for the plan to work. They wanted progress to feel good the whole time, but growth is uncomfortable by design. If it was easy emotionally, everybody would be winning. Correct thinking says, I'll feel this later. Right now, I execute. That doesn't mean suppressing emotions forever. It means scheduling them instead of letting them run wild. You can feel later, you can vent later, you can break down later. But in the moment of decision, you operate from discipline, not mood. There's a reason the most consistent people don't make decisions when they're angry or excited. Neuroscience shows strong emotions reduce activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reasoning and long-term planning. That means when emotions spike, your ability to think clearly drops. Knowing that gives you an advantage. You learn to pause instead of react. You learn to wait before responding. You learn that not every feeling deserves an action. Think about money. How many people sabotage their finances emotionally? A bad day turns into impulsive spending. A feeling of insecurity turns into trying to impress. A moment of boredom turns into buying things that add no real value. The emotion passes, the bank balance doesn't recover as easily. Over time, that pattern becomes a lifestyle. Think about relationships. How many connections get destroyed not by big betrayals, but by emotional reactions, words said in anger, messages sent without thinking, ego-driven responses that could have been avoided with patience. Once something is said, it can't be unsaid. Emotion doesn't pay that price, you do. This is why emotional discipline is self-respect. When you control your reactions, you're protecting your future self. You're saying, I care enough about where I'm going to not let a temporary feeling ruin long-term progress. That mindset builds quiet confidence. You stop being easily triggered because you understand what's at stake. Over time, people will notice something different about you. They'll say you're calm under pressure, that you don't panic, that you move with intention. What they're really noticing is that you don't let emotions make your choices for you. You feel them, but you don't follow them blindly. This doesn't mean you become cold or detached. It means you become grounded. You stop letting every mood rewrite your direction. You stop sabotaging momentum for momentary relief. You stop turning bad days into bad decisions. When you master emotional control, life starts to open up. Opportunities last longer because you don't self-destruct. Progress becomes steady because you don't quit emotionally. Respect increases because people trust your consistency. Most importantly, you start trusting yourself. And when you trust yourself, discipline becomes easier, focus becomes sharper, and the future stops feeling fragile. Emotion will always knock. That's part of being alive. But when you learn to separate how you feel from what you do, you stop living at the mercy of the moment. And that's when you stop sabotaging your own future and start building something that lasts. We're living in a time where everything is built for speed. Fast money, fast opinions, fast attention, fast results. People want proof immediately or they lose interest. If it doesn't pay right now, if it doesn't feel good right now, if it doesn't get applause right now, they move on. That pressure is everywhere, and if you're not careful, it trains your mind to think small. It convinces you to trade long-term freedom for short-term comfort without even realizing it. Most people don't fail because they lack talent or opportunity. They fail because they keep choosing what feels good today over what builds power tomorrow. They want results now, money now, validation now. They want the lifestyle without the patience. But anything that actually lasts takes time. Real growth doesn't rush. Real success doesn't announce itself early. It builds quietly while everybody else is distracted by quick wins. Think about how many people quit right before momentum would have shown up. Not because they couldn't continue, but because they couldn't see immediate proof. They started a routine, stayed with it for a few weeks, didn't see dramatic change, and decided it wasn't working. What they didn't understand is that most progress is invisible at first. Foundations don't look impressive, but they determine how high you can build. There's a reason certain stories stand out when you study long-term thinkers. Jeff Bezos once talked about how Amazon didn't turn a profit for years. Years while people laughed, doubted, and wrote headlines saying the company would fail. The focus was never on impressing the moment. The focus was positioning infrastructure, scale, systems. Short-term profits were sacrificed for long-term dominance. That kind of thinking looks crazy to people who only see today, but history rewards it. That same principle applies at every level of life. You don't need to be running a tech company to think long-term. You just need discipline and vision. Correct thinking doesn't ask, how does this feel right now? It asks, what does this choice cost me in 5 years? That question alone can save you from years of regret. Skipping the gym feels good in the moment. Extra sleep, extra comfort, no discomfort today. But the cost shows up later in low energy, poor health, and lack of confidence. Saving money feels uncomfortable now. It means saying no, delaying pleasure, and feeling restricted. But later it buys you options to move, to invest, to breathe easier when life hits hard. That's the trade most people don't want to make because the reward isn't instant. Short-term thinking keeps you stuck in cycles. You get paid, you spend it. You feel motivated, you get tired, you stop, you get attention. You chase more attention even if it pulls you off course. It feels like movement, but it's really just motion. Long-term thinking creates direction. Every move connects to a bigger picture. Every sacrifice has a purpose. Long-term thinkers learn to delay gratification without feeling deprived. They understand that saying no today is how you say yes to a bigger future. They don't need constant validation because they're invested in something deeper than applause. While others are broadcasting every move, they're building in silence. While others are chasing trends, they're developing skills. While others are flexing outcomes, they're mastering process. This mindset changes how you handle pressure. When you think long-term, a bad week doesn't break you. A slow month doesn't discourage you. You zoom out. You remember why you started. You understand that consistency beats intensity every time. You stop making emotional decisions based on temporary discomfort and start making strategic decisions based on where you're headed. Think about relationships, careers, and personal growth. Short-term thinking ruins all three. People chase excitement instead of stability. They jump jobs for quick money without considering skill growth. They abandon routines because progress feels boring. Then years pass and they're still in the same place, wondering how time moves so fast. Long-term thinkers move differently. They're willing to look boring for a while. They're willing to be misunderstood. They're willing to build without recognition. They know that when results finally show up, people will call it luck or overnight success, but they'll know it was patience paying interest. There's also a certain peace that comes with long-term thinking. You stop panicking about every setback. You stop comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 10. You stop rushing life. Instead of asking, am I winning today? You ask, am I progressing overall? That shift alone lowers anxiety and sharpens focus. If you only think about today, today will keep repeating itself. Same habits, same excuses, same outcomes. Tomorrow doesn't magically change because the calendar flips. It changes when your thinking does. When you start making choices that serve the future version of you, not just the current mood. Long-term thinking is an act of self-respect. It's believing that your future deserves better than constant impulse. It's trusting that patience isn't weakness, it's strategy. It's understanding that the grind you commit to in silence creates a life you don't have to explain later. This world will always reward quick reactions and loud results in the moment, but history, legacy, and real freedom belong to the people who were willing to wait, build, and stay consistent when nobody was clapping. When you train your mind to think long-term in a short-term world, you stop chasing moments and start creating a future that actually lasts. Your mind is a filter, whether you realize it or not. Every word you hear, every image you see, every conversation you sit and passes through that filter and leaves something behind. Over time, that buildup becomes your perspective. Not your potential, not your intelligence, but what you consistently consume. Most people underestimate this, then wonder why their thinking feels scattered, negative, or small. They blame stress, bad luck, or circumstances without realizing their mental diet has been feeding them the same energy every day. If you consume chaos, you'll think chaotic. If you wake up and immediately flood your mind with bad news, arguments, outrage, and comparisons, your nervous system stays on edge. You become reactive instead of reflective. If you consume excuses, you'll start justifying mediocrity. You'll hear people explain why they can't win, why the system is against them, why effort doesn't matter, and slowly those explanations become your own, not because they're true, but because repetition makes them familiar. Science supports this. Research from Stanford shows that repeated exposure to negative information increases stress and reduces problem-solving ability. That means it's not just emotional, it's neurological. Your brain literally becomes less effective at finding solutions when it's constantly fed negativity. So when people say they feel stuck, overwhelmed, or mentally tired, it's often not because they lack ability. It's because their inputs are draining their capacity to think clearly. Correct thinkers understand this early. They guard their inputs the same way they guard their money or time. They don't let random opinions rewrite their self-image. They know everybody has something to say, but not everybody deserves access to their mind. They choose what they listen to, who they listen to, and how often they expose themselves to certain environments. That's not arrogance, that's awareness. Think about how much time people spend consuming content that adds nothing to their growth. Endless scrolling, gossip, outrage, comparison, and noise. Hours go by, and afterward they feel empty, anxious, or behind. That's not accidental. That's the effect of feeding your mind low-quality information. Just like junk food affects your body, junk content affects your thinking. You might not notice it immediately, but over time it shows up in your confidence, focus, and decisions. Correct thinkers are intentional about mentors, even if those mentors never meet them. They learn from books, interviews, speeches, and conversations that challenge them to grow. They sit around people who talk about solutions instead of just problems. They don't need every voice in the room to agree with them, but they refuse to stay in environments that normalize staying stuck. Think about someone who's trying to change their life while surrounded by people who mock discipline, minimize ambition, and turn comfort into a lifestyle. That's not a motivation issue. That's mental pollution. You can have the strongest intentions in the world, but if you're constantly breathing in low expectations, eventually it affects you. Humans adapt to their environment faster than they realize. This is why changing your inputs can change your life without changing anything else. Same job, same city, same responsibilities, but different content, conversations, and influences. Suddenly your thinking sharpens, your standards rise, your excuses sound weaker, not because you became someone else, but because you stopped feeding the version of you that wanted to stay comfortable. When you change what goes in, your thinking elevates automatically. You start seeing opportunities instead of obstacles. You start hearing possibility instead of limitation. You start believing growth is normal instead of rare. That shift doesn't come from hype. It comes from consistent exposure to ideas that stretch you. Pay attention to the people you talk to the most. What do they focus on? Complaints or solutions? Growth or gossip? Fear or execution? Over time, those conversations shape your internal dialogue. What you hear becomes how you think, and how you think becomes how you move. This also applies to what you say to yourself. Internal inputs matter just as much as external ones. If your self-talk is negative, sarcastic, or dismissive, you're feeding your mind the same poison you claim to avoid from the outside world. Correct thinkers catch themselves. They challenge destructive thoughts. They replace them with language that supports progress, not perfection. Protecting your mind doesn't mean avoiding reality. It means choosing perspective. It means understanding that being informed is different from being consumed. You can know what's happening in the world without drowning in it. You can acknowledge problems without letting them define your outlook. That balance is power. Think of your mind like an investment account. Every input is either adding value or draining it. Over time, interest compounds in either direction. If you invest in growth, clarity, and discipline, your thinking becomes an asset. If you invest in negativity, distraction, and excuses, your thinking becomes a liability. Most people protect their phones better than their minds. Passwords, cases, updates, security. But they leave their thoughts wide open to anything that wants access. Correct thinkers flip that. They treat their mind like the most valuable property they own, because it is. Every decision, every habit, every future outcome starts there. You don't rise by accident, you rise by alignment. When your inputs align with the life you're trying to build, your thinking follows. And when your thinking changes, your actions start to reflect it. That's not motivation, that's design. Life isn't fair, and deep down everybody knows that. But knowing it and accepting it are two different things. A lot of people spend years waiting for life to balance the scales, waiting for apologies, waiting for recognition, waiting for things to finally be equal. And while they're waiting, time keeps moving. Opportunities pass, energy fades. Waiting for fairness keeps you stuck in the same place, because fairness doesn't owe anyone a schedule. Correct thinking starts when you stop expecting life to explain itself to you. Not everything that happens will make sense. Not every loss will feel deserved. Not every win will feel earned. But reality doesn't change based on what feels right. What changes is your response. Correct thinking accepts responsibility even when it's uncomfortable, not because everything is your fault, but because responsibility gives you leverage. If it's yours, you can work on it. If it's always someone else's, you're powerless. A lot of people confuse responsibility with blame. They think taking responsibility means beating yourself up or accepting disrespect. That's not what it is. Responsibility is simply saying, this is my situation, and I'm the one who's going to move it forward. Even if you didn't create the problem, you still decide how much it controls your future. That decision alone separates builders from victims. Victim thinking sounds subtle, but it's loud in the long run. It asks, why did this happen to me? Why did they do this to me? Why does everybody else get chances I don't? Those questions don't lead to answers that create change. They lead to stories that justify staying stuck. Correct thinking asks a harder question. What am I going to do about it? That question doesn't care about fairness. It cares about movement. Look at people who rise from nothing, not just financially, but mentally and emotionally. They didn't have perfect circumstances. Most of them had stacked disadvantages, limited resources, broken systems, no blueprint, no safety net. What they shared wasn't luck, it was refusal. Refusal to let circumstances become identity. Refusal to let pain turn into an excuse. They didn't waste energy debating whether life was fair. They put that energy in execution. Execution is responsibility in action. It's waking up tired and still showing up. It's learning what you were never taught. It's building skills when nobody is watching. It's owning your reactions instead of blaming triggers. That mindset doesn't look glamorous at first. It looks lonely. It looks heavy, but it produces results. When you own everything, excuses disappear. You stop saying I can't because and start saying I will figure it out. You stop explaining your situation and start improving it. Excuses feel light in the moment, but they weigh you down over time. Responsibility feels heavy up front, but it builds strength. Just like lifting weights, the resistance is what makes you stronger. Think about how often people give their power away without realizing it. They say, my past ruined me. My family held me back. My environment made me this way. There may be truth in all of that, but once you let it define you, hand over control. Correct thinking acknowledges the past without living in it. It says that happened, but this is happening now. Responsibility changes how you see obstacles. Instead of asking who's to blame, you ask what's required. Instead of waiting for permission, you take initiative. Instead of complaining about lack of support, You become self-supported. That shift is uncomfortable because it removes excuses. But it's also freeing because it puts the outcome back in your hands. There's a reason responsibility scares people. It removes the safety of blame. When you take responsibility, failure hits differently. You can't hide from it, but neither can success. When you win, you know it wasn't luck. It was effort. It was discipline. It was consistency. That builds real confidence, not borrowed confidence. Responsibility also changes how you carry yourself. You stop looking for validation. You stop explaining your moves. You stop waiting for people to understand your vision. You understand that results speak louder than fairness ever could. Over time, people start treating you differently, not because you demanded respect, but because responsibility commands it. This mindset doesn't mean you ignore injustice or pretend systems don't matter. It means you don't let them stop you. You work within reality instead of arguing with it. You find paths where others see walls. You adapt, adjust, and keep moving. That's not weakness, that's strategy. The weight of responsibility builds strong shoulders. It builds resilience. It builds clarity. It builds patience. You become harder to break because you stop relying on external conditions to stay motivated. You become steady, reliable, dangerous in the best way. At some point, everyone has to choose. Either you wait for life to treat you better or you take ownership and build something regardless. One path feels easier emotionally. The other creates freedom. Responsibility isn't fair. It doesn't care about excuses, but it works. When you stop asking life to be fair and start asking yourself to be accountable, progress accelerates. Not overnight, not without struggle, but steadily. And that steady progress is what turns pressure into purpose and pain into power. Thinking correctly won't make life easy. It will make life intentional. You'll stop reacting and start designing. You'll stop chasing motivation and start relying on discipline. You'll stop hoping for change and start creating it. The moment you upgrade how you think, your actions follow, your habits align, and your results catch up. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being aware. Because once you see how your mind works, you stop being controlled by it, and that's when everything starts to shift.